To provide a little background for those who don't know, Milrose and Howard Zimmerman Architects and Engineers formed a strategic partnership at the start of 2022. Since then, we've been working together to leverage each other's strengths and provide our collective clients with high quality services at every stage of the product lifestyle. The Milrose family of companies now consists of 8 leading companies, including Permanent Advisors, Master Plan, McCormick Compliance Consulting, Integrated Group, and SIS. We're excited to continue to improve the same top quality services, and our clients are excited to have them as well. So we're going to take our clients in New York and take them to a national level. It's very exciting. With that, I'll now introduce you to our panel of experts here at HLZAE. Carolyn Cass is Director of Facade Compliance at HLZAE. She is a registered architect and qualified exterior wall inspector. She'll be discussing everything we need to know about FISP, including the upcoming Cycle 10 deadlines and what you can do now to ensure your building is compliant. Brian Chester serves as the Associate Director of Structural Engineering here at HLZAE. Brian is a professional engineer and qualified parking structure inspector who will be discussing the newly established Local Law 126, which requires owners of parking structures to have them inspected every 6 years and file inspection results to the DOB. With that said, Carolyn, take us away.
Thank you, Brian. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And we hope this presentation is going to be helpful for you. HLZAE has been in business for over 40 years and has performed work on over 18,000 projects in New York City. Our focus is maintaining existing buildings and providing our clients with solutions that not only meet local requirements, jurisdictions, code, et cetera, but also the needs of our clients as we prefer to establish long-term relationships and do what is best for our clients and their properties. Here's a selection of our services. As you can see, we offer many services and strive to be an all-encompassing company that can offer almost every professional service that your building needs. This includes exterior restoration, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and fire protection, forensic investigations, code compliance review, roof replacements, and many, many more services. Our specialty is in existing buildings in New York City, and we try to do our best to provide all of these services to everyone. I'm going to get into the nitty-gritty about the facade inspection and safety program. It's a rule that is enacted to prevent facade materials from falling off buildings to protect the public from injuries and fatalities. As I'm sure many of you know, this has happened over many years in New York City and other places. And so this is something that New York City has really focused on. As you can see with this diagram, New York City is not the only city with the regulation in place. However, it does have some of the most stringent requirements. Currently, there are 14 cities in the US with a similar rule, and Jersey City just added a similar regulation, which includes inspections of concrete structures, which was due in December of 2022, and a facade inspection program as well for any building over 4 stories that is due in December of this year. So just wanted to bring that to anyone's attention that may not have been aware of that. To get into some more information about the New York City facade inspection and safety program, any building that is greater than 6 stories in New York City must inspect their exterior walls and appurtenances periodically. This must be performed by a qualified exterior wall inspector, otherwise known as a QE. And we must inspect the building, perform close-up inspections, and submit a report to the Department of Building that they find acceptable. The FISP rule originally went into effect in 1980, and it's been updated several times in the past 40 years. It started out as Local Law 1080, and most people still refer to FISP as Local Law 11, which stems from Local Law 11 of 98, which was one of the updates. But it was changed to FISP in 2010, and then additional new updates were implemented in 2020, and I'll go into some details about that in a little bit. But just to explain in regards to when buildings need to be filed, it is based on the last digit of the block that your building is on. So A-window filings, A-window buildings need to be filed in the 2-year period from, in this instance for cycle 9, 2/21/20 to 2/21/22. If your block ends in 4, 5, 6, or 9, the window has closed. The DOB will still accept reports, but there are penalties that are assessed monthly and annually with that. The B window just closed. It was from 2/21/21 to 2/21/23. And then the C window opened 2/21/22 and is going to close into 2/21/24. Just to give you an understanding, if you have a new building that has been recently constructed over 6 stories, that you have a grace period of 5 years after the first temporary certificate of occupancy is granted, or the only certificate of occupancy is granted. After that 5-year grace period ends, if it falls outside of the filing window, after the your filing window closes, you are exempt until the next cycle. If it ends before your filing window or within your filing window, you have to file a report in that cycle. So this is a diagram regarding the 10th cycle. The 10th cycle starts 2/21/25. The DOB has enacted a new rule stating that in the 10th cycle, if you haven't filed your previous report, you can actually file your report at any time in the cycle, even before your filing window opens. And just to give you guys an understanding, if you have a building that has an ongoing repair job from 9th cycle repairs that you have to do, and the final inspections are performed within a year of your filing window opening, you can still utilize those inspections. Your close-up inspections are good for 1 year from the time of the inspection to when you submit the report. So, keep that in mind as a cost saver. So to explain some of the things about the rule, there are 3 different categorizations for buildings that we have to determine based on the close-up inspections and general inspections, visual inspections of the building. The first one is, the 3 here are safe, swamp, and unsafe. So basically, safe means that your building may not be perfect, but nothing will become unsafe before the next filing cycle. Unsafe is that there are either immediately hazardous conditions, something that could fall off tomorrow and cause an issue, or something will become unsafe within 1 year. So it may not fall off tomorrow, but it's not going to last very long. And then swamp is safe with a repair and maintenance program. So nothing was observed to be unsafe or would become unsafe within 1 year, but a condition would become unsafe within 1 to 5 years, or before the next filing cycle. So also the new rule enacted in 2020 includes deadlines for repair timelines. So if the building is swamp and the building hasn't completed the repairs by the deadline identified by the QE, then the building is subject to violations and penalties. And if the building is unsafe, and there's the conditions aren't repaired by the deadline provided by the QE as well, extensions of time requests, which I'll go into a little bit more detail later, but which are need to be filed by a professional, will not be accepted past that deadline, and a new report is needed to be filed to move the deadline if it's not completed. So basically, that's how all these things work. So here is an example of a hazardous condition. As you can see, there's severe cracking and shifting of the masonry. And after we opened it, the structural steel behind it was determined to be severely deteriorated, and we needed to replace them. So as much as I wish we could have X-ray vision, we can't always determine the causes of the conditions based on what we see just from the exterior. So a lot of the time, we have a condition like this that we hope is just a, repair, and it turns out to be something much larger. We have some examples of similar kind of conditions that could be swamp. You've got some deteriorated mortar and some cracked brick. This cracked brick is not over a facade. It's over an enclosed area, so we can consider it swamp because it's not a hazard to the public, things like that. The DOB may disagree with us, but that's a totally different story. And to build on what what I had mentioned before with some of the changes in the 2020 updates, the inspections requirements have significantly increased. In the previous rule, we were required to do one close-up inspection at a street facade per building. Now we have to do close-up inspections every 60 linear feet of public right-of-way. So that includes anywhere that any pedestrian or person can walk under. That includes like pop spaces, or even just parking garage entries if they're set back from the street area a little bit. That additional linear footage gets added into the entire 60 linear feet requirements. So it can vary per building depending on the situations. Additionally, we are now required, if you have a cavity wall building, that probes are required to be performed at each close-up inspection area. So there are some exemptions. So if the building was built in the past 10 years or recently performed a complete reskin or a pinning restoration to the building, and we can provide evidence to the DOB that the wall ties were installed correctly, we can potentially get an exemption. But if nothing has been really done to that level, we need to do probes at every location, and we need to provide photos of every probe, determine the condition of the wall ties, the backup masonry, the waterproofing, and if they are code compliant at the time of the construction of the building or the installation of the wall ties, if that was at a different time. So the DOB has also increased their level of qualification for people who are considered to be QEs, and as well as qualified inspectors. So just to throw it out there, both Brian and myself are qualified exterior wall inspectors. You need to have a professional license and more than 7 years of relevant FISP experience, meaning restoration on buildings that are applicable for FISP, as well as qualified inspectors must have 3 to 5 years of relevant experience on FISP buildings before they can be qualified to do the FISP inspection. So just to give you guys an idea, we have HLZAE has 8 QEs and 40 qualified inspectors on staff. So we are completely capable to perform your inspections on buildings. The DOB also now expects multiple close-up inspections at the building, and they want additional information a lot of the time. So if something looks a little questionable, they want to know if we've sounded it, if we attempted to remove it, if there is loose materials. They want evidence, photographic evidence that the piece has been removed from the building, and they want confirmation that all appurtenances, guardrails, air conditioning, window air conditioning units, enclosures, everything is structurally stable and attached, and also that they are code compliant as well. So they really have definitely upped their game in the past 10 plus years. As kind of touched on before, they also have increased their penalties and added some new penalties. So the failure to file your report, your FISP report by the deadline, can give you a late filing penalty of $1,000 a month. It used to be $250 a month. So that's obviously a significant increase. This is before inflation went up, so I didn't plan for that. But it's also the failure to file is $5,000 a year. Again, that was previously $1,000 a year. So I think they probably noticed that there was a lot of people not filing and wanted to, try to motivate people. And then the extension of time request is basically if the conditions on an unsafe building are not repaired within 90 days, a QE needs to submit a extension of time request through the DOB Now system stating that, we're working on the repairs, we're doing things, we're making progress. This is the reason that it's taking so long, et cetera. What types of means and methods of protection is in place. And if those are not filed every 90 days, the building will accumulate $1,000 a month in penalties. And then there are additional penalties based on the sidewalk shed and the amount of years that have gone by for the extensions not being filed. So it can add up and be significant, especially if you have a large building. Additionally, if the repairs for a swamp building are not completed by the timeline, the DOB can go out and issue a failure to maintain, failure to correct the swamp conditions, and issue a $2,000 violation for that. So additionally, another thing that the DOB has enacted, each building that is applicable for FISP is required to post their exterior wall condition certificate in a visible area, typically the lobby or an entryway. This is similar to the energy grading and things like that. And if the DOB visits your building for any reason and they don't see the certificate, they can issue a $500 violation and continue to issue them until the certificate is posted. The certificate is available to the individual who signed the FISP report on the DOB Now safety website, or you can also request it from the QE who filed your report as well. So one thing that has that's pretty much the summary of all of the 2020 updates and new requirements. Obviously, there's other things, but one of the things that we have found very beneficial for our clients is industrial rope access. So both Brian and I are SPRAT certified and have been performing IRA inspections for the past 6 years. And it is very efficient and a safe method for performing inspections. And even the contractors can do minor repairs on buildings with this, which has been very helpful. HLZAE has 10 SPRAT certified inspectors that are qualified inspectors, and we are increasing our team this year as well. The real advantages of rope access is we're able to perform numerous inspections in a day. The rigging is very efficient and has less impact on the occupants. I'm sure anyone who has had, scaffold rigging on a setback that is a tenant or a unit owner's area, I'm sure you've gotten tons of complaints over that. This is basically us just landing on it with a rope and then continuing on. So we may have to close it down for a day, but we don't have to close it down for multiple days. So usually the tenants are much happier with that option. So this is an example of us performing inspections on 111 West 57th Street. We had to inspect 100% of the building as mandated by the Department of Buildings after an accident that happened. Not an accident, but an incident of something becoming unsafe on the building. First, we inspected the interior to make sure that there was nothing really loose, and then we inspected the building 100%. Did take a while, but it was really fun. So we also have, here's an, as I was saying before, we can have contractors make some minor repairs. So a violation was issued to this building and the contractor was able to make minor repairs quickly and without a sidewalk shed to resolve the violation. So that was very beneficial and saved, this was a very large building, so it saved the building a lot of money in regards to a sidewalk shed. So this is another building that we were able to utilize rope access and a contractor. We saved the client about $75,000 by not having to pipe scaffold the cupola to waterproof it. We were also able to inspect the waterproofing to confirm it was installed correctly. So it has multiple advantages there. This is the Flatiron building. We performed 18 inspections in one day and was able to save the client approximately $100,000 in pipe scaffolding based on our findings for the repair campaign on this building, which has been going on for a while. So basically, we are here to help. And while I hopefully have your attention. My strongest recommendation to building owners or boards is to get ahead of the game. The longer you wait, the less options you have in regards to FISP. And at the end of the year, the DOB gets backed up and CD5s take a lot longer to get approval and contractors are very busy. So you can't make last minute repairs that might be easy to do at one point, but they can't squeeze it in, and you also have weather complications. So I really encourage you to start your FISP inspections as soon as possible. And then, as I mentioned before, the inspections are valid for 1 year, and it gives you more time to make decisions and potentially make some small repairs that you have maybe a safe building, or maybe not an unsafe building. Maybe you have a swamp building. It really can make a big difference in the long run. So I hope this was informational to everybody, and I will now pass it over to our very qualified Brian Chester.
Thank you, Carolyn. So local law 126, periodic parking structure condition assessments. This is a new rule. The Department of Buildings initiated this, somewhat of a reaction from the Surfside building collapse in Florida. The idea is in an organized fashion to get eyes on these structures, make sure they are safe for the occupants and the buildings above them, especially in Manhattan. A lot of these parking structures are beneath buildings. So if there is ongoing and unchecked deterioration, beneath an entire occupied building, worst case scenario, things like what happened in Florida could happen. So this is a response to that. The rule is based on RCNY 103.13. So aside from this entire presentation, it's like a couple of pages. So if you wanted to read it, you can go through it, and they list it out pretty well, even for the layperson to understand what the rules are. So, in general, if you're familiar with FISP, this will be familiar. Every 6 years, parking structures need to be inspected. They have to be inspected by a qualified parking structure inspector, QPSI. That's a whole process to get accepted to that based off of certain qualifications. There's an interview with the Department of Buildings. And I believe the Department of Buildings has a registered list of the qualified parking structure inspectors on their website. Our company has a couple of them. So yeah, so we can take care of them. The timing for when the inspections and reports must be submitted is based off of this chart, and here's sort of a simplified version of it. Basically, it's all relative to your community district. If you're not sure what your community district is, you can Google Manhattan Community District and a little map will pop up. It will tell you exactly what you have. So basically, if you are a building owner or property manager in Manhattan, you'll definitely want to go check it because your property might be due at the end of December 2023. Otherwise, the rest of them and the outer boroughs will be 2025, 2027. So it's already happening. We're 1 year into it. So who the parking structures apply to, it's generally everyone, private, municipal, state-owned, commercial, residential. Basically, if you've got more than 2 or 3 parking spots, it probably applies to you. Standalone parking structures that you would see, more in the outer boroughs or even in the suburbs, those apply. The garages I was mentioning underneath the buildings, those are going to apply. In some respects, it's a little easier to think about who doesn't apply. And this is listed in the rule, but auto repair shops, outdoor parking lots. I think probably the most important one for people to remember is, the private garages for 1 and 2 family homes and garages with fewer than 3 cars. And I'll use the term garage and parking structure interchangeably here, same thing. So the inspection procedure, you're going to have to retain a qualified parking structure inspector to kick all of this off, but generally speaking, it's incumbent on them to design the inspection program based off of the age of the structure, the materials, history that they would determine from reports, previous repair campaigns, and they'll set that forth with a visual inspection. The visual inspection tells us a lot, but it doesn't tell us everything. Further, the QPSI will, continue to sort of customize what type of inspection is going to be needed. And that's where we go into sort of the physical examination. I think this is where it starts to diverge a little bit from FISP. This is far from just a visual inspection, and not that FISP is, but there's pretty stringent requirements for just how hard of a look we're going to have to take into the parking structures, and I'll get into that a little bit later. A report will be generated, submitted to DOB for their acceptance. And another interesting thing that they will be having is we will have to submit a sort of customized annual observation checklist to the parking structure. And they will have to have their designated person whom they feel is qualified to go out every single year and look at this checklist. And it would be their responsibility, if they found something worrisome, to notify the QPSI or some other professional to come out and take a look. So basically, from now until further notice, some human being will be looking at the requisite parking structures every single year, not just the reports. So I mentioned physical examinations. At a minimum, 10% of each structural element is going to need to receive this physical examination. And they want us looking at the most deteriorated areas. So that's going to be 10% of beams, columns, slabs, ramps, girders. And at a minimum, that's going to be sounding. They list other potential types of physical examination, which could be cores, probes, non-destructive testing, optical surveys. Maybe you're going to do lab testing for chlorides, things of that nature. But it's all going to be sort of dependent on what type of deterioration the QPSI is finding and what information they need to get from the structure. I'll get into this a little bit later, but if there's safe with repair and maintenance type items, the structural analysis is going to have to be performed on the structure. So if we don't have plans, some of this physical examination starts to come into play, where now we need probes or GPR to locate reinforcing bars, things of that nature. So it turns almost into a forensic type investigation. So I touched on this a little bit before, the structure, the obvious things: beams, columns, slabs, girders, ramps, bearing walls, connections. Even if there's a situation where maybe the parking structure is above another level, we're going to have to inspect the level below in case deterioration has migrated down. Or conversely, if there's something above a parking structure that seems to be leading to deterioration inside the parking structure, we're going to have to inspect that. So I don't foresee too many situations where that would happen, unless we're talking about a landscaped roof or something like that. But from an interior standpoint, that would be an odd one. But underneath, certainly, anything beneath a structure like this is going to tend to deteriorate as water infiltration migrates down. Appurtenances, there is an enormous list of appurtenances that the DOP marks in the rule for inspection. It's basically everything: roll down gates, bollards, light fixtures, wearing surfaces, railings. Fire stopping is going to be an interesting one. People don't usually pay much attention to fire stopping in parking structures, especially when it's underneath buildings. There's decades of abandoned and sometimes live conduit plumbing, and they're not always very well fire stopped. So it'll be interesting to see just how forceful the Department of Buildings is with the fire stopping issue, but that's going to be part of it. So I mean, they're looking at everything, and it's going to be a lot on the QPSI to find all this stuff. Facades is also a part of this. So if, it's easiest to think of facades of if this is a standalone parking structure outside of a mall or something like that, then we're going to have to inspect the facade. But, thinking of it conversely, just by exceptions, if the building's already part of FISP, you don't need to inspect the facade again. It's taken care of. If your building is outside of the requirements of FISP and it occupies less than 50% of the square foot of the building, then we don't have to do it. But there will be some, shorter buildings that are mostly parking structure in the city and boroughs that are going to have their facades looked at now. So similar to FISP, we have safe and unsafe. Those are familiar. Another classification for the parking structures is going to be safe with repair and engineering monitoring, or SREM. SREM is, so, I mean, just thinking about safe, very similar to what Carolyn mentioned before. If there's, these structures aren't going to be perfect, but if conditions of deterioration are not going to become unsafe, or really unsafe within the next 6 years, then we can consider them safe. If they are SREM, they're sort of falling in between the two. So we think that if it's not addressed sort of in the shorter period, that this is something that could become unsafe. And if a parking structure is going to be classified as SREM, it sort of kicks off a cascading effect of next steps. So the parking structure inspector is going to have to map all of these locations, and that means going out and drawing the parking structure. So that's going to be a pretty big demand on time. So important for parking structure owners and managers, if you've got drawings, get them to your engineer from the start. It saves them a lot of time. Another thing that's going to happen is structural analysis of the deteriorated members. So the Department of Building wants to see, they want the engineer to prove load carrying capacity of those beams and columns and slabs, et cetera, that are deteriorated, and also compare them back to members that are good. And that sounds pretty straightforward, except if you remember, nobody has plans for their garage. So this is where some of that physical examination might come in, and your engineer is going to have to go do probes, find out what the structural members are, beneath the concrete or concrete encasement, whatever your structure is made of. But this analysis is going to be interesting as well. The Department of Buildings is giving us the option of saying that a building or a parking structure is safe with repair, or repair and monitoring. So that's actually somewhat nice. Sometimes there's conditions that might be expensive to repair, but if we could just monitor it, maybe we can kick the can down the road, or perhaps the stresses have already been relieved, and maybe a crack formed and the structure's happy, and that's where sort of the engineering monitoring would come in. And as we submit the report, we'll have to let the Department of Buildings know, these are the things that we want repaired, these are the things that we want monitored, and that monitoring will have to be very clearly defined. Who's doing it, how often, what exactly is this mode of monitoring? Is it optical, visual? Is there instrumentation involved? So on top of all of this, and to sort of keep tabs on things, if your parking structure is SREM, you're going to have to file another report in 3 years. And this is going to let the Department of Buildings know what's the status of those repairs and monitoring. Has there been any new deterioration? So we do all this again in 3 years. And ultimately looking further down the line in the cycle, you're going to have to make all of these repairs before the next cycle. So similar to FISP, you can't have the same SREM condition 2 cycles in a row, otherwise it would become unsafe. So if you add all of this up, it really behooves you to have a safe parking structure, because all of this talking just sort of translates to money. And so that's what owners and operators of these parking structures are going to want to avoid. So keeping them safe is the name of the game. So unsafe conditions. These are the conditions that are immediately hazardous. That could be overhead concrete is going to fall, or could be something significant enough that we're worried about either a partial or full structural failure. The Department of Buildings is sort of going to treat these similar to an emergency. The unsafe conditions need to be corrected within 90 days, which, if you think about permitting things, getting contractors involved, performing this work, it's really a short window. In the sort of immediate now of finding an unsafe condition, the Department of Buildings is going to have to be notified. 311 is going to have to be called. They are going to want immediate measures to so to make this condition temporarily safe. That could be temporary shoring done in an emergency basis. They'll issue an emergency work order. Netting. There could be partial vacates of an area of the garage, the entire garage. In a worst case scenario, could be a full vacate of the building. These will be case by case scenarios, and I think for some of this, it won't just be your engineer's opinion anymore. The Department of Buildings is going to have the forensics unit down there, and they're going to be driving the bus or riding in the sidecar and steering the wheel for you. All of this also means you're going to get a failure to maintain violation. And depending on the severity of the unsafe conditions will determine what that violation is going to look like. So, if you've had an unsafe condition, you take all of the proper steps, you fix it. The QPSI is going to have to go back out and inspect and file another report. As I mentioned before, 90 days is what they're looking for in terms of a turnaround time of fixing these. That's not always very realistic. Honestly, that would be incredibly impressive unless it was a very local issue. But if you're human and you can't get it done on time, time extensions requests can be filed. If you give them good enough of a reason, they'll probably allow it. But again, depends on what we're talking about. It's probably a little bit easier, I'm guessing, to get time extensions for FISP type items because you've got to shut up. Things tend to be perhaps a little bit more architectural in nature, but if these are structural components, and if people are occupying the building, they're going to be a lot more strict about it, in my estimation. So this is a great example of a parking structure in Manhattan. It's beneath I think 30-story building. We went out there to do our 10% physical examination through sounding, and you can see, and by the way, this was not meant to be material removals, this was sounding. And all of these areas of spalls with exposed reinforcing bars, these were all previous repair locations, not by us, that were not properly done and were falling. And so, if you coordinate often with your parking structure operator, owner, whoever they are, they get pretty cranky when you start taking parking spaces away. This structure ended up having a full vacate, not the building, but all of the parking, both levels, got a full vacate until emergency shoring could be installed. And what you're seeing here is not the emergency shoring. This was the sounding contractor just wanted to put something up. But the actual shoring was designed, filed, installed under an emergency work order. Top left, that's a hole all the way through the slab. So, from visual inspection, I felt like, ho-hum garage, I've seen much worse than this. And then we did sounding, and this is what we found. So, start early. So, filing fees and fines, pretty straightforward. I mean, I think in the grand scheme of things, filing the report, these fees are peanuts compared to everything else, but similar to FISP, you don't want to get behind. The late filing fees are quite a lot, and they add up quickly. And it's worth noting, here and sort of harking on it again, if you do have unsafe conditions, a failure to maintain violation can range from, I believe it starts at 500 and it goes up to 10,000. So you really want to avoid any of the bottom 2/3 of this slide. So as I mentioned before, you really want to start now. One of the interesting dynamics of this is the building ownership, the parking structure ownership or lease. You know, these are always kind of interesting relationships, and there's often a lot of finger pointing about who is actually responsible to maintain these structures and where are we drawing the lines. You know, ultimately that's going to come back to what it says in your lease or bylaws, or, you know, whatever that sort of ownership dynamic is. But start the conversation now, because if there's anything that I can tell you with certainty, it's that, you know, every day that the garage operator doesn't have full capacity in terms of parking, they're going to be upset, and you know, they're probably going to be looking for some type of compensation. So, you know, starting this communication early, letting everybody know that this is coming, sort of doing your homework, who's responsible for what, can help down the line, because as we're starting some of this physical examination, you can't sound over top of cars. You're going to have to remove them. Will you have to empty your entire parking structure? Probably not. But, you know, you might be operating at partial capacity while this investigation is going on for, you know, a day or two, whatever that's going to look like. When you get your QPSI on board, the first thing that they're going to ask is for previous reports. Does the building have the original structural drawings? Are there drawings from a previous garage repair project? Have there been any violations? Any type of information on the history of the structure is going to be really gold in helping to set up what the investigation is going to look like, but also if this parking structure is going to be unsafe or SREM, giving the engineer a leg up on some of that analysis, because if those plans are available, that really helps. And it's worth reminding or saying it again that you really want to have a safe structure. So if you start early, you have options. You know, if we find a couple of locations of deterioration, you can probably just go repair them quickly. If you need a full-on garage repair project, well, fine, you know, but that takes time to get plans together, file, get a contract, do the work. You know, if you hustle now, even if you're part of this first cycle, you might have time to take care of all of that and have a safe structure and avoid this analysis, avoid a monitoring program, avoid another report that you have to file in 3 years. And by the way, you're going to have to do these repairs before the next cycle anyway. So if you can start them now, avoid those types of headaches. And yeah, so to wrap it up, you know, what you can do now is everything that I just talked about, but maybe the easiest thing is just reach out to us or your trusted consultant who happens to be a QPSI. Start that conversation now. And, you know, this is new for everybody. So I think anyone who's a QPSI knows that there's going to be a learning curve in educating the property owners and management, even Department of Buildings. I'm sure they're still figuring out just exactly how they want to police this and implement it. So, so give us a call and we'll start there.
All right, thanks, team. Looks like we have just a couple minutes here for a couple questions. I'm gonna hit one from the Q&A. No, I'm gonna hit three here. One question here to start us off. Is a shed required during the FISP process as performed via rope access?
No, it is not required for the inspections. And if the probes, with one of the contractors that we work with, we can do probes via rope access and inspect them without a shed. They have a proprietary protection methods that has been approved by the DOB. So you actually do not need a shed for performing probes in that regard. Again, it may depend on the situation otherwise. And then something that I realized that I forgot to bring up, that if your building is unsafe, you do need to put a shed up immediately. And if it's a hazardous condition, your QE can provide you with an emergency shed letter so you can get it up right away. There's also other means and methods for securing things. You can do structural netting if it's isolated conditions and things like that instead of putting up a shed. But again, this will all depend on the conditions on the building.
Fantastic. And to follow that up, Carolyn, how can you apply for a QE? Is it requested through the DOB or through another city organization?
You mean as a professional registered architect or engineer?
Yes.
You need to provide a resume to the facades unit at the Department of Buildings, and they will review it and determine if they think you have enough experience. And then you have to do an interview with them so that they can classify you as a QE.
Fantastic. Brian, let's get you involved here. I got a nice little question for you. Who is responsible for any repairs if the inspector finds work to be performed at a parking structure?
Yeah, so I mean, I touched on this a little bit. This is a difficult one to answer, and it's definitely going to be case by case. You know, depending on if that parking structure is leased out, or if it's owned like a condo, there should be, you know, sort of documentation of what exactly that agreement with a capital A is. And, you know, I would start with your legal professional to go over what the wording is there, and then, you know, start that conversation after you've done your homework with the parking structure operator, owner, whoever that is, and then make sure you guys are on the same page, and best of luck.
There you go. There you go. And just to wrap things up, one last question. It seems to be a very popular one. Carolyn, back to you. What happens if swamp repairs were not corrected from the previous cycle? What's the chaos?
So technically then the building is considered to be unsafe. We kind of have a term we call administratively unsafe, as long as the conditions aren't hazardous, and we do describe that in our reports. So we say, but you still do need to put up a sidewalk shed, and you will still receive a failure to maintain and violations regarding your hazardous conditions, your unsafe building.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you both. You guys are absolute icons, and I appreciate your time today. Thank you all for joining us today. Unfortunately, our time has ran out, like many other college basketball teams this time of year. So as I would like to, I'd love to thank you all for joining us and interacting with our panel today. As I mentioned upon the intro, please look out for an email from us with a recording of our webinar. And also we will look to answering each and every one of your questions that we got that were unanswered today. If you're interested in utilizing our FISP or Local Law 126 compliance services, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Again, thank you and have a wonderful afternoon.